all these stories, and I'm not saying Lou's just carrying information. I'm not saying disinformation, but there are a lot of websites talking about Yellowstone Park. So most people don't understand that the super volcano is becoming active and all that stuff. Doug and Joe, I've photographed Yellowstone Park every year for the past 43 years, both in visible light and infrared. I'm really well connected with the geologists and the different people that would be in the know to know if there's any warnings. So what I think is the noise out there, and I'm just saying this because I'm 90 miles north of Yellowstone Park, actually by helicopter I'm less than 20 minutes.
Wow.
But the point is that, and I mean, I can get down there in a moment's notice. That's not bragging. It's just that I've had alerts. They've landed in my yard and taken me down there because people said, oh, it's going to blow, it's going to blow. Well, one of the things I do is when I fly over the lake, there's a specific area where the activity, where most of the seismic activity takes place, not just seismic, but the area it shows the greatest concern would definitely show hot on thermal, which it does not at this time. But more than that, because I get consistently, what a hypocrite, I live on the bridge of the edge of a volcano and stuff. Well, let me tell you this. Henry Groover was up here about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, and God specifically sent Henry. Now, I got news for you. Nobody in the world I know, none, nada, and I'm talking about verifiable, true eyewitnesses can even claim to have had the miracles that Henry's had, and he was sent to Yellowstone Park to a specific point in the park, and the Lord commanded him to speak to the volcano and to literally say it will not erupt. Now, Henry is a man who had the blessing of going to Two-Step Adder Island off of Okinawa that was uninhabited due to the amount of poisonous snakes. And when Henry tore down the high places, those snakes literally disappeared overnight. So I got news for you. Henry Groover would take his place in history as being, the one who absolutely, and I'm not lifting him up, I'm just saying that what a wonderful, loving, kind, powerful man. So saying all that is to say specifically this. Yellowstone is literally my backyard. I get down there more than I'd say most people, and over the 42 years I've been photographing it, I graduated from MSU with both still photography and motion picture production, and then also had a minor in art history and anthropology. So I get down there more than most people, and I doubt there's anybody in the country that has more photographs. My photographs of Yellowstone, each geyser, some of them are up on my website, stevequayle.com. I just don't know of anybody. I'm not claiming that in a braggadocious state. I'm just saying I know what I'm talking about. Typically when Alaska has earthquakes, there is a tie between Alaskan quakes and activity in the park. There have been days when Yellowstone Park has had 900 microtremors. So everything I know and everyone I know and people that I know will talk off record to me that are in the know. There is no issue with Yellowstone at this point. Now, saying that, Bozeman, Montana had what I think they call them direcos the other night, and we do have a lot of weather modification going on over the state of Montana. We've already had our blizzard. Yesterday we had our blizzard. We've got a lot of snow in the mountains here already. But for the record, I'm just saying to all of you that are panicked about the newest thing to worry about, don't. Here's the point, Doug. Tonight, V and I are going to talk about not only the financial, but the state of affairs in the whole United States. You've been talking, I heard a little bit of your intro. This shutdown is as phony as it can be. There's no lack of funding, except, isn't it interesting, for the national parks? Why would they shut national parks now? Why would Montana federal lakes or property on federal lakes boat ramps have concrete barriers placed on the ramps so you can't, get your boat in the water and stuff, and they're going in at night? You tell me they don't have any money, yet they can, pay top dollar to get people working from midnight to 6 out of sight and in the hours of darkness. So what we're dealing with tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is we're dealing with a total facade. Everything that happens is orchestrated. Nothing happens by chance. And even now you're seeing some of the park rangers in Washington, D.C. saying they've been ordered to make life miserable. Did you see that, Doug and Joe?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They've been ordered to make life miserable for the vets. Now, here I want to say something to the vets. Even vets have gotten on my case about giving warnings. I would say this: do you want me to give you the warning? And ask yourself this: who else told you? And listen, this isn't defensiveness. It's just a heads up to what's going on with the vets. I'm hearing emails. Forgive me. I'm getting emails and getting phone calls from vets that are not getting their medication. They're being denied access to the VA. They're being stonewalled. Some of these brothers in the Lord are waiting 8 to 10 months. So I just say horse feathers. How's that for being nice, Doug? To all of you critics, especially the vets, when you say that I'm overreacting, I have sat down with some of the most amazing men in the world, and they have laid the plans out ahead of time. I tell people, all I am called to do by the Lord is warn and prepare. Warn and prepare. Warn and prepare. And again, given the amount of angst, A-N-G-S-T, in the world and concern in the United States, and look, we are being terrorized mentally. Because it used to be we didn't have to worry about going to sleep at night and waking up in the morning to go to work. Now we go to sleep at night, we don't know what's going to come to our door at night, and we don't know that there will be a job tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, this whole thing that we're talking about, the economy of the United States, is an absolute takedown. This is the, if you will, the phoenix being caught on fire so that the New World Order can come about. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to quote Kyle Bass's interview with one of the administration's head guys when they said their goal is to destroy the dollar. It also shouldn't take a rocket scientist, and I would draw everyone's attention to the fact it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to know that Christians are being persecuted all over the world, that they're being persecuted in this country, they're being persecuted in the military, and it's about bloody time that men in the pulpit stand up and scream bloody murder. Because when we fail to take on our brethren who are being slaughtered worldwide, that slaughter is coming to the United States. You know, Doug, one of the hardest things I've ever had to overcome, and it's been tough, and thank God for every one of you that intervenes and intercedes for me, and I'm talking about intervening on a level of thank you for the mighty men and women of valor that have literally brought me to the point where I can still speak without being murdered. The point is that I'm called to warn and prepare. When I met V and I made contact through, I think he heard one of the shows and stuff, we just started communicating, and I realized that here was a brother in the Lord that had been raised up and given great wisdom and great position and prominence in the financial field before he saw certain things taking place and had to leave some of his former employers due to shenanigans. That's about the safest I can say. So tonight we're going to try and cover a whole lot of territory. We're going to cover a whole lot of subject matter. But ladies and gentlemen, do not think for one instance that this is happening by chance, that this is just a Republican. The Republican and Democrats, there are as many traitors in the Republican Party, traitors to the Constitution, as there are Democratic traitors. The fact that we've sat back and allowed our veterans to be diminished, to be minimalized, to be absolutely vilified, nullified, and having to give up all their rights, including their guns. Yeah, they can go and fight foreign enemies, but they can't be trusted to defend themselves. I understand, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on. I pray tonight after V and I speak that you will too. Go ahead, V.
And V, I'm bringing you on now.
I just want to say welcome, V. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, V, the Guerrilla Economist, his website is roguemoney.net. That's roguemoney.net. An excellent website. By the way, it's a membership-based website. That's a membership-based website. Worth every penny. And it's pennies, I think pennies a day, actually. It's not very much at all. $2.99 a month. It's a great informational portal for the economic side of things. Mr. Guerrilla Economist, welcome.
Great to be back, Doug, Joe, Steve. It's a wonderful evening here in New York, and as the world sits around and waits to see exactly how things will play out in Washington, D.C., in the District of Cronies, with this whole staged theatrical shutdown. Every day I get emails from many people, not just in the everyday public life, but also people that are in the financial world. They're all wondering, when is this shut down? going to stop? Are they going to reopen for business? Will this be the end game? Will they not ever open again, causing the whole economy to slide? One thing I will tell you, it is pure theatrics, because this shutdown couldn't come at a better time, and the reason for that is this. One of the articles that I detailed is called The Financial Fog of War, and it's on roguemoney.net. In it, you see the biggest problem that we've had was the rising interest rates in the bond market, especially the 10-year. Now we've flirted with the 3% mark, which is a very, very uncomfortable position to be in. And then we flirted a little bit with a 3.01, 3.02, and it was getting very uncomfortable. So with the rising interest rates and the rising bond market, they have to do something in order to create the distractions that they need in order to bring this bond market down, number one. Number two, smash gold and silver price. Now, folks, I can't emphasize enough. If you understand, if you take the time out of your day-to-day life and begin to study the history of banking, you would begin to understand that gold and silver, precious metals, have always been kryptonite, for lack of a better word, kryptonite to these banksters. They hate it. They hate it because they cannot run the type of fraudulent games that they currently do with a gold or precious metal-backed currency or a gold standard, so to speak. And folks, most importantly, they can't do what they do if Congress had control of the money supply and the issuance of credit. So when these interest rates began to rise, they needed to do something. The plan was given by the bankers to go ahead. You see, these politicians cannot do anything without getting permission first, okay? So this theater of left and right, this theater of Democrats and Republicrats, that's all it is. It's just theater. Once they were given permission, and the bankers said, okay, you can go ahead and you can do the shutdown, because what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get those interest rates down on the 10-year, because we need to continue the shenanigans that we're doing, and we need to smash gold and silver. And that's exactly what you've seen. Now, how did this come about? Folks, one of the bubbles that were beginning to rise, okay, was the real estate market, okay, the home buying market. It started to rise. And then as it was rising, the Fed's endless money printing created a negative effect on the real estate market. And that negative effect was because of all this printing, interest rates on mortgages began to rise. And we've seen massive jumps from 3.5 to 4.75 in a matter of a week or two. I mean, it was tremendous. So they had to keep the gravy train going. They have to keep it all going. And the question becomes, well, why do they got to keep it all going? They got to keep this debt bubble going. And they have to keep kicking the can down the road because they're not done yet, okay? They're not done yet siphoning all the wealth. They're not done yet destroying completely the middle class. We're almost dead. The middle class is almost gone, but not yet, okay? So when they created this government shutdown, what that did is shut off essential services in the financial sector in terms of the IRS not being able to verify W-2 forms. And you need to have those, tax forms, W-2 forms, 1099, things of that sort, verified in order for you to get a mortgage, in order for you to get a home equity line of credit, a home equity loan, anything that has to do with purchasing a house or taking out its equity thereof. You got to have these tax returns verified. Now, with those things shut down, a lot of the housing market bubble that was created was a lot of speculative buyers, number one, and investors. Now, these people are now looking to stand for any kind of long-term position in the mortgage or a housing market. Because of the shutdown, folks, we're starting to see a massive run from real estate into the bond market. And folks, when I say people who are speculative, I want you to also think about it's not just individuals that are doing this, but the bigger impact is the firms. There's a lot of firms, okay? Blackstone dumped 30,000 properties that they owned, okay? So it's not just individuals, but it's also financial firms that are buying property and flipping it because they think it's a good investment. So now all of a sudden, the bond rate goes down, metals goes down, and the bankers are making a windfall on profit. This also is covering up for the fact, and this shouldn't be any sort of a revelation to anybody. The bank profits, okay, the total bank profits of what they've actually made in the last year or so has fallen to zero. So the question becomes, they're reporting all these quarterly earnings reports where, such and such bank and such company had a quarterly profit turn of, X amount of dollars. One of the things that people need to understand, just because that there's a quarterly earnings report and a company on paper seems to have turned a profit, it does not mean that any profit was actually made. Oftentimes, what a company does, it takes the money that it quote-unquote earned as profit and begins to buy back its own shares. It begins to reinvest in its own capitalization. So whatever profit you had, it's gone. Okay, it's not even there. So all this, gentlemen, what it's simply doing is bubbles. We are in what I call a speculative stagnation, where there's no volume in the real estate market, but yet, the real estate's going up. There's no volume in the bond market. People are dumping bonds. My sources over at PIMCO, which is the largest bond fund in the world, folks, they've dumped $30 billion since September of U.S. Treasuries. $5 billion was dumped in the last month alone. So there's no volume in the bond market. There's no volume in the stock market, but yet it's over 15,000 points. So this shutdown could have come at a better time. It is a perfect distraction. It is a perfect way to create the necessary volatility and just enough fear, just enough chaos for the banksters to work behind the scenes to pilfer and pillage the wealth of the Americans.
So, what you're saying, V, if I understand this correctly, the powers behind this charade, this play, this what we're seeing right now, they can push the button at any time. The fact that they haven't pushed the button to really unplug everything, to take this whole system down, they're just not done robbing us yet. That's the whole thing,
correct?
Right? Okay.
Exactly. See, the thing that I want everybody to understand, okay, now everybody talks about, order out of chaos, order out of chaos, okay? Folks, picture the banksters as a demolition team, okay? They're not done wiring up the structure yet. They got a lot of the explosives placed at very key joints and trusses. They got it all placed very well. But they're not done wiring the building completely. Because, yes, is it order out of chaos? Yes. But one thing I want people to understand is this terminology. It is going to be a controlled demolition. They can't pull the plug when they still have some of their guys in the building. They can't pull the plug if there's still a few more sticks of dynamite to be placed at key joints. They just can't pull that plug. And by the grace of God, we still have some time left. We still have it because thanks to the alternative media, which, I'm calling it the new media, because that's what we are. We are the new media. This is real journalism, folks. Hagman and Hagman Report, SteveQuayle.com, RogueMoney.net. These are real journalistic websites and information you get right here. And we, as part of the new media, we exposed a lot of these things. We've caused them to pull back a little bit. And they're on their heels. I get all my sources and the contacts that I have, and I see it just through the numbers, all the things that are being projected towards me, is that they're on their heels. Now, they're in a little bit of a disarray, and that disarray buys us some time. You see, because Syria,
yeah.
And again, I gotta bring it back to Syria.
Yep.
Syria was the key piece. It was the key explosive that's been laid at the central truss, and it was supposed to bring the whole building down. So we screwed that up.
In a big way.
They're not done yet.
Now, V, are we going to see, and this is a question I get a lot, are we going to see a Cyprus-style event take place first? People, I like mental images too. I see a car going over a cliff and then smashing at the bottom of the cliff in a million pieces. Is that the way things are going to go, or is this car going to go off the cliff and hit a rock here, hit a boulder there, and gradually break up before it does hit the bottom? If the car is the economy, how is it going to play out? Is it going to be a bumpy ride down with many hits and strikes and explosions, or is it going to be just one big bang?
Perfect. Great analogy. I'll put it to you this way. Picture the whole entire American family. That's all of us, guys. Picture all of us on a bus. And the bus just went off the cliff. It went off the cliff, and we've hit a couple of ledges. And now we just hit one ledge. And that ledge that we've impacted is holding us. Okay? That's where we are right now. Now, we're all alive. Some of us are battered, bruised, and injured. Oh, I'd say about 52% of us are battered, bruised, and injured, just like 52% of Americans. No job, on welfare, can't find a job, struggling, kids are hungry, all sorts of financial stress and turmoil. The other half of us are okay. We're fine. But we're still sitting strapped into our luxury coach seats, and we're thinking, okay, everything's fine. The structure still remains in the bus. The flat screen TVs in front of me are still running, so I'm going to keep watching that. And there's about 1% of us that are awake, and we realize, holy crap, the bus just went over the cliff, and we're hanging on this ledge. Unless we get out and get help and pull this bus out of this ledge, this thing's going to go over, because this ledge that we're on is not going to hold for very long. And that's the analogy that I'd like to give for this economy. Okay?
It's a great analogy. So, and we're the passengers. And since the bus has already gone over the ledge, there's no chance of pulling the driver out of the seat, getting in the bus driver's seat, and putting it in reverse and going back up the ledge at this point. I mean, there's no way of that happening.
No. The bus represents not only the people represent America. The bus represents the system. We can't save the system, but we can get the people out of the system before the system crashes and it explodes and it's done. Let the driver go with the system, because it is the drivers of this country that got us into this mess in the first place, and they deserve what's coming to them. But it's our job, those who are awake, to get everybody out of that bus.
Great point. Steve, what do you think of that?
What I think and what I know and what I'm seeing is, though, I agree with it's a planned demolition. I think the issue, when it looked like Syria was a go, V made the statement, be all over. Well, that was setting off everything. What happened is, and I believe it was an act again, a divine reprieve, whether God uses the Russians, God uses whoever, God uses the base. There's a scripture, Doug, that says that the Lord, in judging the kingdoms that turn against him, sets up over those kingdoms the most wicked of men. Kind of explains where we're at in this country, I would guess. But the point being is that what we fail to recognize, and this is obviously V is an economist, he's a financial consultant, he's a, oh, good night, he wears a lot of hats. What is going on right now from my perspective, and he has friends and contacts, I don't even know who they are, never ask, and by the way, I never ask names, so if you want to volunteer information to be verified, you don't have to worry about, don't tell my name. And for the record, any of you who send me alerts, I will never put your name up. Even if you ask me to, I won't. So that's not the issue. It's the who will tell you what's going to happen. So when you see everybody, like, here's the thing. They don't want just some of it. They mean the Illuminati. And this is what V is, I'll make it even a little plainer. What he's saying is they want all of it. And so, well, there's yet the last, if you will, ruble to be grabbed, the last piece of gold bullion, the last piece of silver. They're doing this. Now, I want to speak, and I'll let V speak to the financial issue, but I want to speak to the nation that's under judgment. The bottom line is, and this is what I'm called to do, and this is why we dovetail so well, when God judges a nation, obviously one of the ways he does it is he allows pagan nations and completely wicked nations to steal the works of the hands of the people that built the nation prior to them going wicked. Does that make sense to you? Deuteronomy talks about the curses of God, and there are more curses than the blessings, but basically there's a passage that says strangers from without will possess you from within. I have received 6 specific emails talking about foreigners, Asians, high-dollar clothes, high-dollar cars, visiting some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the United States, taking pictures. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for the record, Pastor Langford and others, a couple other guys, got the word from the Lord 2 years ago that America was in bondage, but soon the bondage would turn to captivity. What I think most people have got to understand, and Hawk heard in real time a recording of a Canadian general talking about, when you see all these FEMA camps and everything, do you understand that everything we own, you own, I own, if they get their hands on it, that becomes a spoil of war. And I submit to you, Doug, that not only have the homes already been dibbed, if you will, is that behind the scenes, our own, I won't say our own, but the entities that are running this country have already sold everything, lock, stock, and barrel, down to the last oil painting on the wall or the last Canon camera or whatever. Just say it. Imagine this. Imagine the greatest fire sale in history as the land burns and all. It's just like what happened in Germany, and some of my German listeners remember this. But when the Allies moved in, they took everything. They wanted the art. They pillaged Germany, and a lot of the great treasures have yet to be found. That which wasn't moved to Switzerland was moved to South America. But this is what's going to happen. It's going to rape, pillage, and plunder. And see, this is what's hard for Americans to grasp. When it isn't happening before their eyes, they believe that, oh, that's off in a distant future. Yet the people that were mowed down in the Kenyan Mall, they went shopping that day. They never thought it would be the last day they'd ever shop. So the point that I'm trying to make in all this is that the only thing I would disagree with V on is the numbers of the middle class in my mind, and I'm a little more final than he is. I see the end result. The middle class has been destroyed. The money to the small businesses is cut off. What Obamacare and all the draconian legislation will do, it will strangle the lifeblood out of the remaining businesses. And I think it's Hobby Lobby or somebody sent a letter out that went on the Internet just claiming they've been in business for decades, and now because of Obamacare, they're going to shut down, 400 or 500 stores? You see, when Americans don't speak up, they feel that somebody will speak up on their behalf. And if anybody on my photo of the day, I would encourage you all to go to Steve.com and see the photo of the day. Because the interesting thing about my photo of the day is that it's a tin metal chicken, a rooster that's rusted, and I said it's the mascot of the American pulpit. in rebellion against God. I didn't use the words rebellion against God, but I basically said the apostate preachers in the pulpit. Now, why did I put a chicken up there? A chicken is absolutely a less regal bird than the eagle. And where we once soared with eagles, will be now, and here's a great metaphor, we'll be like looking for land to peck out the most meager existence. You see, because, Doug, here's the thing that breaks my heart. In Zephaniah 1:13, it says this, "Therefore their goods shall become a booty, and their houses a desolation. They shall also build houses, but not inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards, but not drink of the wine thereof." That's Zephaniah 1:13. So what I'm sharing tonight, from my perspective, is that the time of looking for the white knight to come in and rise up and save us is over. Again, because I live further in the future, not in the financial realm than V, but I live in, I would say, the end result. That's what's the hardest thing for people to grasp, but I understand it. And so many times have I pled with the Lord, God, can't I just go take pictures and just quit doing this? And he'll simply ask me this question, do you love me, Steve? And I said, I love you, Lord, but your people are tough to love. Do you love me, Steve? I love you, Lord, but could you make your people a little easier to love? I love you, Lord, then feed my sheep. And so this is the thing, okay? We don't do what we want to do. We do what God calls us to do. And I'm not bitter about it. I'm not kicking up or making a fuss. All I'm saying is this, is that it is imperative that people understand when they when they fail to speak up, act up, and stand up for Jesus, the very words of Jesus will come to pass in their individual lives. This isn't a collective statement. Jesus said, if the salt loses its savor, it's henceforth good for nothing but to be trodden under the foot of men. Well, I could even put it in modern terms, to be mowed down by AK-47s. You know, when the light that used to be set on the hill that everyone might look up, when that's allowed to dim, then everybody walks in darkness. They bounce off walls. And what we're doing now, ladies and gentlemen, if you listen to the mainstream network, you are like a tennis ball or even a racquetball going into a court at different angles and bouncing all over trying to get the truth. There is no truth. Every single network is bought, paid, and owned by the very Luciferians who are titillating you and are entertaining you and are perverting you through their horrific programming. It's all lies. That's why Jesus rightly spoke. And boy, if there's ever been a time, and maybe no other time in history, have the words of the Son of God, the Savior of the world, come into such focus than literally at this time. Because again, Doug, people don't know the days we live in. Everybody thinks if they blink, if they put their fingers in their ears, they don't have to go on. I'll give you a good example. I have friends I actually have stockbroker friends that buy metals from me, even though their own companies would frown on it. That's why they come to me, because they could never even talk of such a thing. If you want, ladies and gentlemen, go on my website and read King World News, the different interviews with everybody like Fleckenstein and Ergon von Geiritz and these different people, Eric Sprott. There's so many of them, but just here, these are billionaires. These are smart guys, Jimmy Rogers, telling you what the whole game is about. They all live out of this country now. And the point being is that we all can't leave. So we have to basically take our stand, but the only way any of us will be able to stand, I'm going to turn it over to V, is by standing with Jesus. When you choose to stand with Jesus, I'm talking only to the believers who are believers, followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's the only way you'll stand now. If you think you can cower in the shadows, be quiet, and use anonymous emails to me and say, don't use my name, I will just tell you this. Don't even worry. I would never use your name. But your cowardice is going to kill you. I'm sorry. That's the bluntest way I know to be. When it comes to finances, if you believe that a piece of paper that exists in a computer that is nothing more than electrical impulses is going to be the same thing as something you can hold in your hand, if If a guy's starving, he can have a $1 billion portfolio, but if you give him the meal, that meal means more to him at that point in his life than his portfolio. I cannot even begin to tell you how, and V can tell you about this, and V, you should address this, the cyber plots, plans, and schemes, as your dear friend has told you, how much cyber attack and how it's going to be done. Because look, it may still be a gradual thing, but when the lights turn on, the rats run for their holes. So the light's going to come on. It's God shining the light on it. Nobody else, Doug. Nobody on talk radio said what I said. I'm just saying this. I'm not a prophet. I'm just a watchman. I'm saying this clearly, that before America is judged, you don't think America's being judged? Then wait until you can no longer deny it. And the blood in the streets that's over there, there are entities, non-human entities, controlling human entities that have promised them a lie and untold riches and eternal life apart from Jesus and eternal perversion to their heart's content. And those men and women in the Senate and Congress have already bought the lie. And so they don't understand that, and ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for somebody to represent you, no one can represent you better than the great intercessor, Jesus, before the throne of God. I got news for you. If you're looking for a man to save you, it ain't going to happen outside of Jesus. And it's the same thing in finances. Week after week, or let's say every couple weeks, when V comes on and shares with you the nature of what's going on in the world, and especially in the financial world, if you stay in their arena, you become lion fodder. If you stay in paper, you've got nothing. I talked to a woman today. She says, we've got a portfolio, blah, 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 but we have nothing if the bank's closed. We have nothing. And I've got to tell you, again, husbands, listen to your wives. Please listen to your wives. Because women walk in an intuitive sense that men, because we know everything, and I say that, mockingly. I mean, how many times have I been mistaken when I just should have taken the lead when my wife would say, there's something wrong with that guy? Well, the bottom line is you need to understand that women are designated as they're the nest builders. And if they're the ones that have to cook the soup when you come home from your stock brokerage job or work in the fields or a plumber, electrician, contractor, whatever, then they're naturally going to be thinking how to put meat on the table to take care of the family. And yet I see kamikaze husbands basically saying, I'd rather go down with the ship than basically admit that my wife is right, or I'd rather hold on to a invisible photon than grab a piece of silver gold or even a turkey breast. Go ahead, V.
I want everybody to imagine, if you will, an invading army, so to speak. And picture, if you will, you got this invasion force that's coming in, and we're all in a camp, right? And in the camp that we're all in, there is a fence right around surrounding the camp, protecting us, keeping what's outside out. We have some guard towers up there. We got, some of the searchlights, spotlights working. And we shine a light onto this invading army, and they just scurry back into the darkness. It's easy at this juncture right now that we're in to kind of, for us to rest on our laurels, because, one thing I said is that, we got them on their heels. We kind of slowed things down by the grace of God. So the human psyche is to say, okay, fine, the enemy's on the retreat, let me just rest and relax. One thing I want people to understand is they're not retreating. They're regrouping. And when I say that the decision is going to be between a fast, horrific collapse or a slow bleed, you got to understand either choice is going to be very painful. I don't know all the details on how things will play out in terms of world events. It's impossible for any one person to know. But one thing I do know, irrespective of what path this country is going to go on, okay, whether it's the slow bleed where we die economically slowly and the bus slips slowly off the ledge into the precipice, or it's done quickly. The point is, the system is done. everything that you're used to doing in terms of your quality of life, your living standards, your purchasing power, the things you love to do. You're watching the football games on Sundays. You're shopping. You're hanging out with the buddies at the local bar. These things are going to change. They're going to change forever. And when this country transitions from the current economic system into whatever it is that's going to happen, whatever it is that these guys are planning, it's not going to be good. There's going to be a lot of pain involved. Now, folks, I want you to understand one thing. In the Great Depression, in 29 after the crash, and on through 33, you had the majority of Americans living in the countryside, living in farms. They were, for the most part, self-sufficient. And they had a small percentage that lived in the cities: Boston, New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia. Now, during that time, where the majority were in the countryside and in the farms, 7 million people starved to death. Today, we have the complete inverse. We have the vast majority of people living in the cities, living in the suburbs surrounding these cities, and these are urban environments. And you have a small percentage in the countryside and in the farmland, and even smaller out of that is self-sufficient. When an economic disruption occurs, and I've talked to people who went through collapses, okay? If JC, if you're listening, I mean, I've spoken to this guy, survived the economic collapse of Latvia after the Soviet Union fell. There are tremendous things that occur, tremendous hardships. And that is, we as people are not ready for it. If you're not prepared for it individually, the kill ratio, folks, from every expert that I've spoken to, the kill ratio in a scenario like that in an urban environment is very high. You're talking about an 80-90% kill ratio because the people are just starving. People killing each other for food. People just out of sheer violence. So you have to be prepared. That's what this whole thing is about. The thing is, the numbers, the only thing I can look at is the numbers. And the numbers say that an economic crash is inevitable. Folks, there's no, like I said before, there's no volume in the marketplace. There's no real profit being made. Everything is, because the Fed is printing so much, there's no proper valuation. And when you don't have a proper valuation, it throws everything off. It throws off your profit earnings. It throws off your price to book. It throws off every aspect, okay, of a company's earning reports. It throws everything off because you have this speculative bubble that you've based your whole company upon. So valuations are impossible. So never before has there been such a fog of war or a fog of financial war. And just because the enemy is no longer at the fence anymore doesn't mean that he's not watching us. It doesn't mean that they're not sitting back seeing how we respond, how we react. Are we going to go back to our football games and our beer and pizza and wings on Sundays? Are we going to go back to business as usual? Are we going to go back to shopping? That's how they dictate. So when this holiday season rolls around, they look at you, and you're one of those fools standing online on Black Friday, and you're one of those people that have to have the latest gadget and widget, the new iPhone 5S, and the S is for same. Okay. If you're one of those people, the bankers know that for the most part, then you've reverted back into your old carnal shopping materialistic ways. And at that point, they'll strike. So just because we're winning right now does not give us an excuse for us to rest on our laurels. It is a time for us to pray. It is a time for us to really weep for this country. It's a time for us to be active. It's a time for us to strike while the iron is hot and not give up. And now is not the time for us to back down, but to go all the way.
Gravity of what you just said. I don't think there are many.
No, and you know what, Horton? I don't know. I mean, I called into the radio program a little late, so I don't know exactly if you gentlemen talked about it or not. But that young lady who was killed yesterday in D.C. Have you guys talked about that?
No.
No, we need to talk about it tonight. V, go ahead. You
because
talk.
I was so disheartened. Okay, this is a young woman, 33, 34 years old. She had a 17 or 18-month-old child in the back of her car. Let me tell you guys something. Okay? She's a dental hygienist. She's a professional. She earns a very good income. Her employers that she's worked for said that she's a stable individual, no problems, her friends, her families. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I've checked some of my sources, and they believe wholeheartedly this young lady panicked. She happened to take a wrong turn, wound up in an area. You had some of these trigger-happy, dumb punk cops who quickly just lifted up their Glock 21s and their AR-15s directly in her face. The girl panicked and spread away. And what did? They pumped 17 rounds into her. By the grace of God, that 18-month-old baby sitting in the back of that Infinity. Okay, she wasn't driving some July. This is a professional woman. This could be your wife. This could be your girlfriend. This could be your wife. This is somebody's daughter. And that 34-year-old young lady gets shredded by a bunch of punk, trigger-happy cops. And that poor child, 18 months old, traumatized, screaming for her mother as the bullets rip through her flesh. Have we gone to the point that these cops are so idiotic and so brainwashed, these dumb punks, that they are so quick to pull a gun on a woman? They're so quick to pump lead into a woman? This is what we've come to. And you know what? There's a lot of people in the patriot community that have said that this action that has taken place with this young lady was crossing the line. That this is almost Civil War-like. And I'm not advocating violence. And I thank God that there are good law enforcement police officers that are out there that are standing up for the Constitution. And I thank God to the sheriffs out there, and I had the blessing to talk to some of these guys who are out there standing up for God, standing up for this country, standing up for the Constitution. But the rest of you young punks who have a badge and a gun, you need to wake up and you need to figure out real quick whose side you on. Because that's uncalled for. Every single one of those punks should have been arrested. And I saw the video. This guy takes his police cruiser out of nowhere, rams her car high speed, and hits a barricade. And the media says, "Oh, he's injured. Who cares? The girl's dead." And then within hours, the media is like, "Oh, she's crazy. She's postpartum. She's this. She's that." All sorts of allegations to cover it. And then what did these scumbag, pool boy, man whores, and paramours in Washington D.C. What do? They stood up as a standing ovation to the D.C. police. I wanted to throw up. This is how far we slipped. What the heck happened to us? What the heck happened? Am I living in North Korea? I mean, that could have been somebody's wife. I mean, I want you, every man out there who's got some testosterone in his veins, Any father out there who's red-blooded American, that could have been your daughter. That could have been your wife. That could have been your kid, your grandkid in the back seat. She wasn't some ghetto trash. She was an educated professional driving an Infinity. Shredded. Unbelievable. That, to me, folks, was a symptom of a huge problem. You know, in New York, we've got police shootings all the time. You know, we had Amadou Diallo, 40 shots because the guy was reaching for his a wallet. You know, you hear stuff like this. But when you're freaking out a young woman, a woman is not, she doesn't have testosterone in her blood to think clearly in a panic situation. A woman's instinct is to take her child and run. That's instinct. That's human nature. A man's instinct is to confront the threat. And so that poor woman, that young lady, acted on instinct. And every professional that I've talked to that has commented about this said, V, that woman, she was panicking. She was panicking. She was in a panic. You could see it. And in the panic, you don't think straight. Can't you imagine that? Imagine that now we're in a country where, you know, I got to worry about my wife. And other men who are red-blooded have to worry about their wives going out with their kids, and God forbid they take a wrong turn, having some cops shoot at them. It's ridiculous.
It is all orchestrated. Let me share this with everyone. One of the and years ago, and I'm talking 20 years ago, and points in between, I talked to a lot of former Soviet agents, former U.S. agents and stuff, and they talked about this day in the future when law enforcement would be absolutely, if you will, energized and have a get-out-of-free jail card for cold-blooded murder. I got news for you. A panicked mother is nothing for one of those testosterone guys to take down. I mean, one man could take her. When I say take her down, I mean restrain her. The fact that she was murdered in cold blood, let's call it what it is, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. In the streets of America, when you did not speak up, you Christian pukes in the pulpits, you yes. silent devils that yield to the power of hell. And I'm standing by what I'm saying. And if you fit that category and you wear those shoes, then shame on you. Meow, meow, meow. And I'm constraining myself. I'm praying for that little girl, and I'd ask every intercessor to pray for the trauma that little girl is going to experience, because there's so much trauma now that her mind, it's not just one life destroyed. Ladies and gentlemen, you watch it, you watch cold-blooded murder, and you sit on your dead posteriors, and don't give me that stuff. Look, we're on talk radio. Somebody says, what do you do? I've been fighting it for years. I do everything I can, and when the time comes, I'll do what I must. And I've prayed, and I've asked the Lord. I said, Lord, intervene, please, please, Lord, intervene. And at least, and I get this feeling in my spirit again, Doug. The Lord said, this is what your nation has become, Steve. Your nation has become the streets are beginning to flow with blood. And I remember Mike McQuitty, God bless him. He and his wife were both killed in a car accident a number of years ago together. But he said, when the blood starts flowing, it won't stop. Let me say something, ladies and gentlemen. I used to scuba dive. I used to be just a fanatic about scuba diving, and I was in the water with sharks and all kinds of stuff. And having ruptured my sinuses at about 90 feet off of Catalina and getting vertigo, when the blood hits the water, you ought to see what shows up. Thank the Lord, I'm still here to talk about it, but that really happened. And watching how the predators move in on the helpless. Ladies and gentlemen, we have become a predatory nation. We have predators. They're consuming you. And anybody with children or grandchildren, I have 5 kids, and I have, 4 grandchildren. And, gee, at 35, I feel really old. I'm just kidding. The bottom line is that what V said, that's an intentional misdirection. What V said is so absolute on par. When you get all these guys standing up and clapping, listen, there's going to come a time, and I said this 22 years ago on talk radio, and Hawk could tell me, but Hawk can tell me more about my first shows than I can remember, but I do remember saying this, and some of you who listen to me, Gary F. and others who started with me that many years ago, remember this. I said there will come a time when they will slaughter Christians in the arenas, and there'll be coliseums. The bands will be playing on, the rock bands will be playing on, and
That's what it will come to in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, God wants us to be victors, not victims. If you won't stand up, you're already a victim. You know why? Because you're terrified of the outcome. I can tell you your outcome is assured if you don't stand up. If you do stand up, you might find out that you taking a stand will cause A, B, and C to take stands. The same thing with the vets. How many you guys, Navy SEALs out there listening, Spec Ops guys, 160th guys, all of those of you who have lost friends through the betrayal of the men ordering other men to their death, how many of your fellow believers and brothers have to be slaughtered and murdered before you say something or do something? And look, again, what I'm inciting people to is to pray, to intercede, to act up, speak up, and stand their ground with the power of the Almighty God. But if somebody comes at you to blow you away, make sure you're out of the holster before they are. I'm sorry. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you understand what V just said is so true. This is critical for tonight, Doug, because we're watching the slaughter. We're watching little kids going to jail for making a gun out of, their index finger and their thumb, or painting guns.
Yep.
We're seeing the most horrific vilification of every liberty and every virtue this nation ever had, past tense. It still exists in humans, or individuals, but not in the country. And yet we say nothing, do nothing. I even know a guy, and I'm sorry if this steps on my toes, that would just like to go surf on the beach and wait for Jesus to come home. Or to take him home. What a pathetic excuse for a human being. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on friendly territory, but it's true. How dare the only reason, you know what? Now I'm getting riled. The bottom line is this. There's a reason why there are so many amazing women of God, intercessors, is because there's so few men of God who are even possessors of the truth once delivered by the faith of our fathers. Well, I'm amazed, and I don't, look, if you want to be on Facebook and think you're witnessing to people, and I'm not aiming this at you, Bob, or anybody that's on Facebook, Russ Disda or anything. But look, that's talk, and that's, presenting arguments to people who can no longer think logically is not winning souls to Jesus. Jesus said, look, if you don't believe me for the words I say, then at least believe me for the works I do. Well, that just basically blasted out 20th century Christianity out of the arena, because most people don't even believe the power of God if they claim to be Christians. Now, I'm talking about the majority professing evangelicals. On this show, we speak to people who have a relationship with Jesus Christ all over the world. We're pleading with people to come into that secret place of the Most High, Psalm 91. We're asking people to come to that place where they realize that the Lord, the battle is the Lord's, and He will fight for them who speak up for Him. And as I've said it before, this is critical. This is Murder, Inc., ladies and gentlemen. Even the mafia wasn't that brazen. Even assassins usually don't do it in the open unless they're blowing up a car or something. And yet now, ask yourself this. Ask yourself why the current slaughterhouse is funding rebels who eat the hearts out of people. Look, I write about Aztecs, Incas, and Mayans. I write about human sacrifice. I write about all the garbage and the gore and the horror, of history. And yet we see it displayed on CNN, and we get some dumbass with the BBC wanting to understand what makes them think. I'll tell you, it's real easy. It's called bloodlust. And we're watching people and hearing of people being dismembered, and little babies having their heads cut off, and mothers and husbands watching it, and the rape and the pillage and the plunder, and those hypocritical female dogs in the women's movement, they're silent as women across the world are butchered and stoned and mutilated. And, if that's offensive to some of you, then you need to be offended, because in essence you would have been mad at Jesus for driving the moneylenders out of the temple, because that's not a good Christian thing to do. I thank God for the men and women in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. Look, there should be a sign over believing fellowships. If you're a wimp, repent. Get
right with Jesus and become a man if you're a man, or a woman of God. But quit abdicating to the devil. And this is why I tell, God bless guys like John Quayle and all of you who have deliverance ministries, and Bruce Lee, Shannon Davis, those of you who are out there in the deliverance world, because that's the dirty laundry. Nobody wants the dirty laundry, okay? Everybody wants the Brioni Ascension robes because some charlatan on TBN promises you that, you know, for so many dollars you can get an Ascension robe. I got news for you. When a person comes to know Jesus, they don't need anything made for us by the world's best tailors, or supposedly best tailors. They are clothed with the righteousness of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's why we're told to put on the garment of praise. I got news for you. If you're miserable, naked, wretched, and poor, you need to go to the book of Revelation and find out who it is that you need to come into contact with Jesus and get right with God. Look, this thing is hideous. When the Christian church did not stand up against National Defense Authorization 1867, you signed your death warrant. When you don't speak out about the Second Amendment and those who will take it from you, those who will take your guns from you will turn those guns on you. When you won't stick up for the innocent, when you won't stick up for the helpless, when you won't stick up for the unborn, those very people that practice butchery without compassion will butcher you with glee. And the word butcher has come into a whole new meaning. So I'm saying this, and it's the same thing with, I'm going to say this, V, and then you can deal with it. The bottom line is, when it comes to your finances, you tell me why those of you who are Christians will put more trust in a stock brokerage or an account that you can't touch, that the system has to stay up on. We're getting ready for grid exercise, you know, in November. I talked to somebody today who basically gave me a cryptic email and said their insiders are telling them it's going down, meaning the grid. Look, if they just shut down the internet for 5 days, can you imagine what they can do in those 5 days? And A can't communicate with B, and Doug Hagman's show won't be on, and Steve Quayle's website won't be up, and V won't be able to come on and tell you what's happened. See, that's the problem, V. It's the stuff is upon us. We're in motion, but no one can come to the conclusion of what these events mean, all taken together. And it's probably, somebody says, well, you don't paint a very good picture. Absolutely not. That's why I use the highest definition lens photographs I can, because I want you to see, to come into focus. In photography, there is a term called circles of confusion. To most people, that would sound like the average newspaper in a given day, but the circle of confusion basically is where the focus, the depth of field, in other words, there's not enough depth of field from point A to point B to be in sharp focus. So what's out of focus is confused. It's blurry, okay? Oh, that God would grant us a clear vision tonight. Oh, that God would grant you a clear understanding tonight, and that you would take hold. And I've talked, Doug and V, I've talked to people who've lost anywhere from 400K, 400,000 to multiple millions, and they shrug it off. They said, so how long are you going to work? The rest of my life. And I said, why? And in a couple cases, those people, I said, don't do it, 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 don't do it. And I've talked to physicians. I said, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And, you know, and I'm talking friends, yet they won't listen. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember this. It's no longer a bird in hand is better than two in the bush. You know, it's the fact is you have to think commodities. You have to think that freedom was a commodity. Freedom was something that everybody in the world used to admire. We used to have a standing in the world. And when I said years ago that America will become a hissing sound in the nostrils of the people of the earth. That's already happening. We are held in contempt. Even Colombia and Ecuador know more about telling the truth than the United States does. Let me make it clear. If you believe that there's anything coming from truth out of any of the major networks or any of the major news sources, they're all owned and controlled by the same people. And you better well wake up.